This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jasperson.
Jesperson and Hicks. And on this Monday, you know that Charles Adler is going to be joining us in just a second. It is the 29th of July when we're talking, which means we've got brand new polling out. Taking a look at the American election, this development over the past couple of weeks, I guess we'll call it. Joe Biden out, Kamala Harris in, has seen some impact on the polling. And, of course, we can't help ourselves from digging into that. Plus, the biggest story, certainly, I think, in our neck of the woods, no pun intended, the biggest story in the country, at least last week, was the Jasper wildfire. And Johnny, we've seen incredible response from audience members.
Yeah, it's been beautiful.
The emails that we're getting, I mean, a lot of people experiencing devastation, heartbreak, huge setbacks, and the like. For some people, total losses of property, including their memories, their cherished items, their businesses. But there's optimism that abounds. We're going to get to a special edition of Positive Reflections, wrapping up this episode presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. Plus, we'll be updating you on some of the stories there. We're learning more about where in Jasper did not burn, and these are obviously praise reports that we're really excited about. Plus, I'm curious for Adler's take on a couple of things that have been driving discussion online, including Alberta's Premier showing some emotion during a news conference last week. We talked to her about it in an exclusive on Friday, and the internet's having its say. And I'm curious to pick Chuck's brain on that. And have you been paying attention to the Canadian women's soccer drama at the Olympics in
the drone
Paris?
stuff?
The drone stuff?
Man, this is, yeah.
The story's wild.
I love these stories because this is all about tech.
Yeah.
And these days, like, how are you going to stop people from doing stuff like this? It's impossible with phones and drones and everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Canada cheats just like everybody else. And so we'll get into this story.
Cheating,
I just
or
wanted
is it
to,
a research?
Okay, so here we go.
Get into
so
it.
here
Yeah.
we go. We'll get into it. I already like where you're taking this. And I have sort of like an ethical quandary that a buddy teed up over the weekend. He's critical of some of the investigative journalism happening here.
Oh, really?
Because it's being done by Canadians. He thinks that the Canadian journalists are screwing over the Canadian athletes. And I thought this is perfect for Johnny and for Chuck coming up on the 29th of July. And so here we are. This episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of HRO Training. We've been telling you that if you're in charge, if you're at a high reliability organization, an HRO, where mistakes simply cannot happen, there has to be a safety culture. There is no other way. And a big part of what you're doing is transforming your company or your organization's approach to safety, prioritizing that safety culture, making sure it's not an afterthought. There's a webinar happening on the 2nd of August. I want to make sure that you know about this. It's at 11 Mountain, 1 o'clock Eastern, ensuring safety excellence, overcoming contractor management challenges. This is co-hosted by Chris Labossiere, who's CEO of We Know Training, and Rob Stewart. You heard Rob on the show before, an applied behavioral scientist. Fascinating insights there on workplace injuries and fatalities. By attending this webinar, you're going to get valuable insights into taking a more intelligent approach to evaluating contractor performance. You'll accurately predict future performance. You'll have a reliable indicator of safety culture. You can learn more by checking out hro.training/webinars. And if you use the promo code Ryan20 during checkout, they'll take 20% off the cost of that webinar. Ryan20 when you get started at hro.training/webinars. First episode of every week, the Emmy Award-winning talk radio legend Charles Adler joins us, courtesy of Tice Automotive Consulting. And it's been a long week, it feels like, since we last spoke, including this big Jasper fire. We'll get to some of the international stories, including the Paris Olympics, in just a little bit, Chuck. But I know a big part of your heart is held by the province of Alberta. How have you been managing emotion, and where's your head been at watching this Jasper fire story play out?
Well, my emotions have been all over the map on Jasper. I mean, it's just hyperbole. People say, Chuck, it's hyperbole. No, it's not hyperbole. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and it's just very tough to see. I just can't thank the firefighters and everyone involved in the rescue efforts enough. It's horrible to see property damage, but human beings got out alive. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for Ryan Jesperson, everything that you do every day, but especially when it's in your own backyard. Just can't thank you enough for that. As far as the Danielle Smith, the business is concerned, look, she has set the table on the idea that she fakes things, that she fakes emotion, and that she fakes issues, because she has said over and over in the last number of years that in order to get ratings in the entertainment game, the media game, that's something that she's done. So when she's accused of saying all kinds of sloppy stuff and nasty stuff, and frankly, not very intelligent stuff, especially when you consider that she's a highly intelligent human being, that's kind of what ends up tarring her, the idea that she will say and do things in order to generate emotion among the audience. Now, the idea that she has somehow changed her spots, that she's different when it comes to political life as opposed to media life, many people are just simply going to refuse to believe that. So there it is. I put that in the parking lot for you. Having said all of that, I do not believe that Danielle Smith is inhuman. And I do believe that Danielle Smith, like any other human being, whether they're Albertans or people in other parts of the country or the world, have to get emotional about a wildfire in Jasper, Alberta. If you can't get emotional about that, there's something seriously wrong with you. There, to me, is some serious things wrong with Danielle Smith's politics, but she's a human being, and I'm not going to dehumanize her by saying she was faking the emotion.
Yeah, and I think you and I both, let me just say this, like early in this episode and early in the conversation, this is not the most important storyline. This is not the most important story here, but it's what a lot of people are talking about the most online. It was a birthday weekend in our house, and so I was doing my best to be present with family in real life, and just ultimately muted my notifications because people are absolutely losing it. And in particular, because a lot of folks and most talk shows, didn't have the Premier of Alberta pulling over on the side of the highway, pulling the motorcade over on the side of the highway where she still had reception to give us a hard 10 minutes as she was en route to Hinton to meet with evacuees and some of those fire crews and then make her way into Jasper. But we had 10 minutes with Danielle Smith, with the Premier of Alberta, and so we asked her about some of this stuff. And we led with the fact that, Charles, you worked with her for a long time. I worked with her for a long time. So I said, listen, I've known you for a long time. I've not seen her choked up like that before. And it's remarkable. And the feedback from the interview, some of it was unhinged in the sense that I didn't call her to the carpet for her crocodile tears, call her a faker, hand out an Oscar. And the more that I'm thinking about it this weekend, I'm thinking that this is obviously purely political, because can you imagine a scenario where it's Premier Rachel Notley, okay, and there's a big fire in Alberta. There's a big fire. Let's make it in Jasper. Let's keep all of the story details the same, except for let's swap out the Premier. And it's Rachel Notley. And, Rachel Notley's emotional, over the fate of Jasper, what's happened there. She's overcome with emotion, seeing 25,000 people evacuate and firefighters staring down 300-foot flames. And she's looking at the absolute devastation of an international crown jewel, of the number 2 most visited national park in the country. And she's looking at this and she gets caught up and she gets choked up at the podium. Can you imagine these same people, and of course I'm being facetious because this would never happen, can you imagine the same people, the same online critics obsessing over Rachel Notley's, number one, pretending to know Rachel Notley's emotional state, pretending to know what she's feeling? They don't have a hot clue. Second of all, calling the emotions fake, the response to a massive, devastating disaster. It would absolutely never happen. And so the point I make here is the people over this weekend that have been blowing up our media accounts, that have been blowing up, that have been trending online, getting the dopamine hits from all the likes, they're obsessed with their hatred of Alberta's Premier. Full stop. That's where the story starts. That's where the story ends. And it really has nothing to do with Jasper at all.
If your heart is driven, your heart, okay, if it's driven by genuine feelings for humanity, you've got a good heart. If your heart has been hijacked by your politics, you've got a heart problem. And I don't have to be a cardiologist to know that.
Johnny, can we call up the clip? This is from just Friday's episodes for people that didn't catch this.
Yeah.
This is going to be the 26th of July. If you want to catch that entire episode, it's like a Jasper super episode. We're really proud of it. People want to check it out. We talked to Counselor Wendy Hall. She joins us from a cabin. She goes, I'm in Valemont somewhere. She goes, I don't know whose cabin it is. I don't know what's going on. People just opened up their home to us. I mean, that is Canada right there. We absolutely love it. But she's devastated. She's lost her home. We talked to Kyle Brattain, the fire scientist, the extreme weather journalist, gives us insight on how that Jasper fire grew so big. We talked to a whole ton of different people. Former fire chief in Slave Lake that was there in 2011. We talked to the CEO of Jasper Tourism and ultimately the Premier of Alberta. And so we have 10 minutes with Premier, and so we're asking her about a couple of different things, including her display of emotion. And then, of course, Chuck, we're talking to her about logistics. And then finally, the clip will speak for itself. This is a pretty unique situation, a big fire, a big rebuild coming up in a national park, and so we ask her about it. It feels a little tacky or maybe a little early to be talking about it, but there will be another interesting dynamic in that it's happening inside a national park, which means there will be an entirely different set of rules. There will be many different considerations. These property owners that have lost their homes, their businesses, they don't actually own the land. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different dynamics at play. How does that impact the job that that your cabinet ministers, that your government will do in this? How does that change the dynamic? It's somewhat of a unique circumstance, very different than Slave Lake or Fort McMurray as an example.
Well, and this is what why we wanted to be involved in the recovery, is that we don't want the parks to use this as an opportunity to shrink the footprint of Jasper. And I know that there have been some voices that would certainly call for that, and we don't want to see that. We want to make sure that the town site gets rebuilt as it's been established, and so that will be our voice at the table.
Well, this clip took off, and a lot of people are going, hang on a second, where's the evidence, where's the proof that Parks Canada or that the federal government might be looking at shrinking the park? Where's the proof on this? Where's the fact check on this? This is a comment that's made during a live interview by the Premier of Alberta. We obviously, for people, I mean, I think most people understand how a talk show works. Something like that is brilliant when it happens in an interview, because all of a sudden you got 3 more shows planned, right? If people think we haven't reached out to the mayor of Jasper, to the federal government, to the environment minister, environment and parks, if they think we haven't reached out to Parks Canada, if they think that we're not going to continue to cover this story, they're obviously nuts. Real Talk has the exclusive on where the Premier's head is at on this, and now we follow up on the story. But it is a legitimate storyline, and it's a great question as far as I'm concerned, the rebuild in the national park. What do you make of how the Premier answered the question?
Well, it was poor, frankly. It was piss poor. And it was not leadership. It was political leadership, I guess, ideological leadership, but it wasn't moral leadership. People are scared out of their pants right now in places like Jasper, okay, and other places that could be hit by exactly the same kind of tumultuous, calamitous event. The last thing people need is for the Premier of Alberta to somehow suggest that Jasper will not be made whole and because of the federal government. You know, this is where people talk about Smith looking for an opportunity, every single hour of every single day, where she's conscious to try to pick a fight with the federal government. Why pick a fight when there, as you say, is absolutely no evidence that the federal government will abandon Jasper? And of course, it won't abandon Jasper. It's silly. It's ridiculous. It's ideological. A few moments ago, I said that if your heart is moved by humanity, you've got a good heart. But if your heart is only moved by politics, you've got a heart problem. Well, if your politics, especially in an emergency like this, a calamitous wildfire, if your politics is still motivated only by ideology, picking a fight with Ottawa, then you've got a problem.
We will follow up on that story. I'm curious to see where Parks goes on this. They've replied to our inquiries, and they've let us know right now at this point, as you might expect, the number one priority is getting the fire out. That's what they're thinking about right now, and that's kind of the line they're towing. But we're on to something here, and I think that the Real Talk audience is going to have something interesting coming up over the next little bit as soon as we can get somebody on the record for that. I thought this insight from Steve Wewell, who tweeted at us, was good. He said the rebuild could shrink the park at the hand of legacy permit process, being hard for individuals, for families and small businesses to navigate. Steve says well-intentioned, stubborn rules that likely can be credited for retaining Jasper's charm and iconic reputation, ironically, may be what holds back the recovery. And I think that Steve stated that really well. So this is a story that there's nowhere to go on this. This isn't the top priority. But obviously, when we take a look at something like this, you tend to evaluate it from a million different angles. It's just sort of how people process big stuff like this.
Look, I just don't like the idea of taking vulnerable people, and that's the people in Jasper and those people who are loving them and neighbors, and somehow turning it into ideological fodder to turn this into Ottawa doesn't care about you, and so Ottawa may not help you. I mean, for crying out loud, do you want to get into all of the Ottawa money that is used to fight the fire? I mean, Ottawa asking other countries for help and getting the help. This idea that Ottawa doesn't care about Jasper, it's got nothing to do with whether Ottawa is liberal Ottawa or conservative Ottawa in terms of who's in the PMO. Jasper is a national treasure, and it's not treasured any less because it's in Alberta than as if it were in, and I'll use the Q word that the ideologues always want to use, Quebec. Quebec is not going to get something out of this. Alberta's national park will get compensation and restoration, and it'll be a major project that a lot of people will feel pride in, and those people who will insist that this is an example of Ottawa somehow not caring about Jasper are going to have egg smeared all over their face. This, to me, is Turkish Tylenol politics, and this is just too bloody important to play that small, fetid game.
We're talking to Charles Adler, presented by Tice Automotive Consulting. We've got a note here from Ben in the YouTube live chat. Says, I was honestly expecting to hear that Jasper had lost like 50 to 80% of the town. As more and more information is becoming available, Johnny, I know even on Friday, you and I were relieved by this. Some of the mapping that people can find, Chuck, it's estimated that they're saying between 30 and 40% of the structures will have been destroyed. Obviously, many more may have, smoke damage, heat damage, that type of thing. But a large part of that town was saved. Obviously incredible work by the firefighters, by crews running excavators, as we've noted before. And I loved this from Carrie Tate, journalist, of course, from the Globe and Mail. She's been with us before, based out of Calgary. She tweeted a photo. I don't know if you saw it, Chuck, over the weekend. She says, downtown Jasper looks mostly like this. And it's an awesome shot of Connaught Drive with a lot of the familiar places, Fiddle River, the Jasper Brewing Company, a lot of people's favorite shops, knickknacks, souvenir shops, bakeries. A lot of Jasper is still standing. And I know for a lot of people that's been just absolutely huge to see.
Thanks, Carrie, for sending that photo out. That restored faith for a lot of us and made us feel even more grateful for the work of the firefighters, because if it had not been for those guys, that beautiful photo wouldn't be available.
So true. We're hanging out with Charles Adler, Johnny Infamous as well. I want to pick both of your brains on this Canada soccer scandal. Plus, we'll talk U.S. politics in just a bit. But the Canada soccer thing is, there's a million different angles on this one.
Is that a drone? That's I see what you did there.
Yeah, that is a drone reference, right?
Let's drone on about the
360 view of the angles.
But it's got me thinking about Ben Johnson. It's got me thinking about Tom Brady and Deflategate and a whole lot more. Listen, Charles Adler appears on Real Talk courtesy of Tice Automotive Consulting, and this is a team that has built its business on the understanding that not everybody loves walking into a car dealership. Not everybody loves using Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace if they're looking for a reliable, affordable, new or used vehicle. But buying a vehicle should be fun, and Tice can make that happen. Tice makes buying a used or new vehicle easy. They fill in the gaps that make the buying experience stressful and transform it into one that's worry-free and even fun. If you're an executive, if you're a parent, if you got your hands full, maybe you're a student, the last thing you have time for is to visit 10 different car dealerships, try to find the proper financing, make sure you get the perfect ride. Tice listens to your top priorities, they take your budget into consideration, and then they source out the perfect whip. They're going to complete the full mechanical inspection, and they're going to deliver that car to you, white glove concierge service, for a fee, a set fee. You can read it all on the website. The fee depends on what the car costs. It's all a business model that makes perfect sense at ticeautomotive.com. Well, at Friesen Brothers, we talked to you a lot about the beef. We talked to you a lot about the great food that you'll find there. We talked to you a lot about what their butchers come up with. Can we load up that photo that we got over the weekend from
that
Wayne?
horseradish.
How
I can
about
taste
this,
it. I can
right?
smell it.
This is Wayne. He's a regular Real Talker, and he submitted this to us over the weekend. For the podcast listeners, let me describe. This is a huge slab of Alberta prime rib with a perfect dollop of horseradish on the side. He's got a beautiful salad. He's got that famous Friesen Brothers sourdough. And he said that they have the carrots and dill sauce that I'm always raving about.
Yeah.
Wayne says, I was at a wedding and Friesen Brothers was catering it, and I just had to send this photo. Says it was absolutely killer. Friesen Brothers Catering is just one of the ways that they are making sure that Albertans are getting great food on their table. Friesen Brothers is family-owned since inception, Alberta-owned, and Alberta-grown. We're hanging out with Charles Adler, of course, as the Paris Olympics are underway, and kind of a tough start for Canada's women's soccer team. The defending gold medal champions busted members of their coaching staff and people around the team. To be clear, not the players, but people around the team busted for using a drone, spying on the New Zealand women's soccer practice.
Man.
So the sanctions come. You got a couple of coaches and personnel sent packing, a fine of 200,000 Swiss francs, and Canada's women's team will surrender 6 points in the standings, which means they basically, if
It's
they
over.
but if they won in extra time their last game,
Sure.
it's still possible for them to defend the gold, but it's going to be a huge uphill climb. Number one, and I'm curious to pick both of your brain on this. Chuck, you go first. Essentially, Canada busted for using a drone to video a competing team's practice on a scale of 1 to 10 on how egregious this is, how embarrassed you are as a Canadian, 1 being the least, 10 being the most. Where are you?
0.
Okay.
Please, would someone please tell me how watching their practice is going to make a dime's worth of difference? I mean, I think obviously it was silly to do it, to punish the players for this. I'm sorry. That just cannot suck enough, in my opinion.
0. Okay, I didn't expect that. I'll note that
I don't care about the damn drone, and I don't believe that it makes one scintilla of difference in Canada's effort against New Zealand or anyone else.
Okay, Johnny,
I don't know about
1 to 10, least embarrassed to most embarrassed or ashamed. Where are you on this one?
Well, I'd have to disagree with Charles. I mean, soccer is a game where, it's not like hockey where, like, if you had a drone watching a hockey warm-up, it doesn't matter. Are those going to be the player lineups the night of? Who cares? But soccer is very detailed, game of inches. 1 goal wins a game. It's very close all the time. And this was a closed practice, too. This wasn't like them in a park or whatever. This is clearly illegal. That you cannot do this. So even if you want to say it gave them no advantage, they knew what they were doing. This is a closed practice of a team you're going up against eventually. You cannot fly a drone over top and look at their plays and look at how they're setting up. Like I said, soccer is a way where you go into the game weeks before with a plan. You don't change the lineup the night before. You don't change your plan. You're going to the Olympics. So they knew exactly what they were doing. They were setting up to get an eye's view of how these guys were going to play, girls were going to play the field.
Do they get a chance to see how they're setting up when the game is being played, when they're actually setting up in real time?
But hang on a second, though. If you heard that during the Stanley Cup final that the Florida Panthers were spying on the Oilers' practice while the Oilers were working on the power play or the breakout,
that's different.
Well, how is it?
That's different. I'm a homer.
Okay.
I root for Edmonton. As a matter of fact, my message to the Edmonton football team, okay, play Trey. That's it. Play Trey.
Play Trey. Do we want to? I don't
you
think
and
we
the
want
entire crowd.
Yeah, I don't think
we
want
can
to
talk about Elks after.
We don't want to talk about the Elks right now. Still struggling there. Canada's coach, Bev Priestman, gets the 1-year ban after this Olympic drone scandal. The team is appealing the points. Basically, they got to beat Colombia, which is doable. I was saying to my buddy yesterday, like, they're the defending gold medal champions. This is different than Canada's men, where you're just like, it's exciting if we're ranked in the top 30. It's exciting if we can crack the top 25 with some of the brightest and most talented young players in the world. But still, Canada's women are the cream of the crop. Now, here's an interesting angle on this. I'm talking to a pal yesterday, and he's referencing Rick Westhead, the investigative reporter for TSN. He does a ton of work for CTV. You've seen his work on W5. Rick Westhead has done a bunch of reporting on the Hockey Canada sexual assault scandal. He's obviously earned a well-deserved reputation as an established investigative journalist. So he's covering the Olympics right now. And his coverage, including talking to sources, has revealed, and people can check it out at tsn.ca, that Canada's men's and women's soccer team have relied on drones and spying for years.
Oh, for sure.
And so Westhead is he's pushing this story out. He's working the Olympic Games. This is making not just national, but international news. He says that both the men's and women's national teams have, for years, been making efforts to film closed-door training sessions of their opponents, including during the women's gold medal winning Olympic tournament in 2021. And these are two sources he's citing that have firsthand knowledge of the activity. So my pal is arguing with me yesterday that Rick Westhead is actually doing a disservice to Canada. Okay? He says that as a Canadian journalist covering the Olympics, what he's doing right now is making the life of Canada's soccer players and the life of Canada's coaches and Canada's medal hopes more difficult by drawing more attention to this story, by revealing further details of the story that people were not aware of earlier. He says that if it were a journalist from New Zealand, for example, doing this, after New Zealand had its practice filmed, it would make sense. But he says that Rick Westhead is essentially betraying the trust that has been put in him by Canadians to be over there as a Canadian journalist. I laughed him out of the room. I think it's a ridiculous argument, but I did say to him, I can't wait to hear what Chuck has to say about this.
Well, here's a situation where my heart and my brain are not very connected, because I get emotional over sports. You know how I feel about our country. I don't want to do another 60 seconds on your head why I love this country. Everyone has their reasons for loving this wonderful country, which is not broken. However, Rick Westhead is a pro. He's thoroughly professional. And I think he is pointing out that Canada has been really silly and, most important, reckless and unprofessional by committing this practice. It hurts the players more than anything else. I don't believe that the players need to be given drone intelligence in order to be the amazing athletes that they are. And so my heart is with your buddy. I wish Rick Westhead wasn't doing this right now. But my brain says Rick Westhead is a really smart, professional journalist, and this is just Rick doing his job as well as any investigative sports journalist in the world can do it. And so we ought to be proud to have Mr. Westhead as one of ours.
Agree on both points. He was just doing his job.
100%.
A. And B, what are you doing? You just said, Ryan, they're one of the best teams in the world.
But maybe that's how.
In women's soccer. But the other thing is, yeah, you want to spy for years? Who cares? You got caught this time, so you won't be spying anymore. But it just to me, like the whole thing of the coaches, like the players are the ones who are getting hurt here, because the coaches, I don't think the coaches sat in the locker room and were like, hey guys, you know, we got this secret drone footage going on or whatever. They just said, hey, we figure they're going to play this or they're going to play this way. You know what I mean? But if the players were in the locker room watching this drone footage, that's a different story.
Like, that is significant, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's significant if the players knew or didn't know, and you feel like the coaches would recognize the magnitude of this.
Yeah.
Like, if you get busted, which they did.
But that's not what happens. As in hockey, the coaches watch the tape and then they relay the information and plays and make their decisions on how the players should play on the hockey team. Like, I mean, yes, sometimes I agree. Sometimes guys are sitting there and watching goalies and seeing how to go over their shoulder or whatever. But that's what I would like to know. I've been combing through some of this thing, being like, were the players watching this drone footage in the locker room or in an office or in a meeting before? If they were, then I don't know. They're just as they're just as guilty, right?
Yeah, I've got some folks who's I think Tony. Someone was asking in the chat. Yeah, was Rick this hard hitting on the Hockey Canada scandal? He sure was. I mean, Rick Westhead is the guy. He's the guy that blew the doors off the whole thing. Yeah. So, and he deserves a ton of credit there. Tracy here says my daughter has performed in top tier athletic cheerleading. Says they do review other teams' routines with their permission, but if they're caught illegally, they'd be thrown out of the competition for good. Kathy says journalists are expected to do their job, and sometimes we may not like the stories they're covering, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't do their job. Like my buddy here, I won't name him because he's like a great dude, and I know he's not trying to he's not trying to have coals heaped upon his head. But the only other alternative is that like Westhead, number one, in his business, the business of scoops, he's just going to wait for someone else to scoop the story. Like, not a chance. There's no way. No. And on the other hand, you're asking him to cover it up. You're asking him to cover up the story. I said it's one thing if Rick Westhead, if the journalist sees the coach. So as the story goes, it was Parisian. It was police that caught one of the coaches retrieving the drone. Okay, and then they see the drone, they view the footage, they see its practice footage, they look at his phone. There are text messages between him and another official with the team, and so then that's how they determine culpability. It's how they determine that more than one person knew about this. Right? If Rick Westhead busted the coach getting the drone and said, "What are you doing?" and conducted his own investigation at tsn.ca, if the police weren't involved, if the IOC wasn't involved, then maybe it's a different story. But Rick Westhead's he's just telling the story. He's telling the story of what happened, what's happening, right? He's not the one making the story happen.
Rick Westhead has to do his job, and he has to do it for like the most obvious reason. What if journalists from another country are getting drone footage of Rick Westhead seeing something that really matters and giving it a pass? What happens to Rick Westhead? What 100%. Happens to Canada's reputation?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, all of this really goes down to one thing. You've got to do your job as well as you can, and you shouldn't be doing things that are clearly illegal, because once you're doing things that are legal, you're not doing your job. So the story here to me is that Canada's coaches are not doing their job and are not doing a service for those athletes. And I will never, ever believe that they can't coach those athletes to win without the damn drone footage.
Or maybe they are doing their job. I like Lightning Rod's comment, and I do agree with him. He says, I think spying on your opponents is a time-tested strategy. Sure it is. You know, a guy sitting in the stands, during, and then relaying that information. But detailed drone footage nowadays is a little different than sending a guy with binoculars from far away. But is it any different? I think either way, you get caught red-handed, that's it. You've done something wrong, clearly, here. They're in the wrong. This isn't like you can't talk your way out of sophisticated 4K drone footage with a camera lens on the end of it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sharon says Christine Sinclair, the GOAT. Christine Sinclair said the players did not watch the footage. Darren says they cheated. Being removed would have been justifiable, but I'm really glad they still get to play because they are a great team and they work so hard. Sylvia says it's a stain on Canada's reputation. Charles,
how do we know they didn't watch the footage, though?
Well, we don't know. We
asked them and they said no.
We don't know.
You know what I mean?
I like to give the players the benefit of the doubt, but you never know. You obviously never know. Charles, where were you? I was in Rudy and Dina Jansen's kitchen having lunch with their son, Jeff, at 303 Parkview Crescent, Southeast in Calgary, when we heard on the radio that Ben Johnson had tested positive for anabolic steroids and would be stripped of his gold medal. How's that for detail? Where were you in 1988 when you found out that Ben Johnson had seen that win disgraced, that 979 would not stand?
I was at 58 CKY, the proud head office for Moffat Communications, greatest radio company I ever worked for. Never had a contract, had a handshake with Randy Moffat, the boss of Moffat Communications, was better than any of the many contracts that I've signed. So I remember exactly where I was when Ben Johnson peed in the bottle and it came up positive. And I'll never forget how people were scolding me because I was a news director and I went on the air with the breaking news and all the rest of it. And people were calling me up, scolding me, because I was leaving out what for many who were scolding me felt was the most important factor, and that Ben Johnson was Jamaican born. He wasn't born in Canada.
Oh, geez.
And why wasn't I pointing that out? That the person who cheated wasn't really a Canadian.
Come on.
And then that became an issue, and I wasn't shy, as you can imagine, about making that an issue. A Canadian is a Canadian.
I'm not surprised to see the entire chat lighting up how I knew it would, and everyone's going, Carl Lewis was doping too.
But for me, this photo was the one, how angry he was to get silver.
This
to
is
him.
Carl
And
Lewis shaking
it's
Ben
like
Johnson's
he knew
hand.
ahead of time.
Oh, yeah, but they were all doping. It's the same as the
I
Tour
think
de
everyone's
France.
doping
right?
and everything. I've said this before. This day and age, the sophisticated way they do things. I'm not saying everyone's on steroids, but everyone's using some form of injection
Some
or
sort
pill
of performance
to give them,
enhancer.
some sort of edge.
Now, no, not all of them illegal.
No.
You're not alleging that every single athlete
But
is...
these guys aren't just eating vegetables and drinking Gatorade and
They're
that's
doing
it.
everything
They're doing
they possibly
every,
can.
yes,
The
yes.
difference between a gold medal and nobody knowing your
Is an
name
inch.
is like an inch or a millisecond. So then here's the question, and that is, if you're not bending the rules, if you're not cheating a little bit,
Droning.
if you're not droning, are you actually really trying to win? Are you ever going to win on a world stage with such tight competition? Maybe people shouldn't. I don't know. I mean, I'm saying yesterday to my pal, Ben Johnson dopes in 88. We got this scandal happening right here. Like, I mean, you look at the international teams. I think of the Russians. I think of the Chinese. You look at these teams where everyone goes, oh, they're just doping all the time. The East German power lifters in the 1980s, and everybody just looks at these athletes, these countries, and just looks at them as dopers and cheaters. Maybe Canada's no different than anybody else.
I don't know. I don't like going through life. My grandmother always warned me that envy was cancer. I just don't like going through life envying somebody who's making more money than me or has more medals than me, and just making the assumption that they're thieving, they're cheating, they don't really deserve it. I'm not saying that people don't thieve, and I'm not saying people don't cheat. I just don't want to go through life as one of those angry paranoids. Anger and paranoia are not healthy for you.
Yeah, Sylvia says that I have terrible logic here. I'm not saying that this is my logic. I'm not saying that I'm glad that Ben Johnson was stripped of his gold medal.
No.
I'm just saying that I think that the culture, and maybe it's not this way anymore, or maybe we're just fooling ourselves. But baseball's Hall of Fame inductions just came around a short time ago, and they're looking at guys that they're going, these guys are never going to get in. Like Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod will never get in the Hall. You look at like Roger Clemens, like some of the great all-time ball players, but everybody knows that they were juicing the whole time, and that's because that was in that era. If you wanted to be one of the big home run hitters in that era, I mean, even if you look away from the drug, wasn't it Sammy Sosa who during batting practice has one of his bats snap in half, and they realized it was a corked bat, and then he was like, "Oh no!" I mean, lucky it happened for him during BP, so he could say, "No, I just use corked bats during batting practice, never during games." And everyone went, oh, "Okay." Right? I mean, come on. Like Barry Bonds went from like 230 pounds to 270 like overnight. I mean, that was just the culture at that time. And I mean, the pressure for these Olympic athletes, for these professional athletes to do it clean. And by clean, we're talking about all kinds of things, drones included, to do it without cheating, to do it without trying to find that edge with such a razor thin margin. I can't, the average, sort of like, couch potato like us, we can't wrap our minds around what they're doing.
No, I mean, I can't wrap my mind around the idea that we need drone footage to win a medal. I realize it gives you an edge. Lots of things give you an edge, but there's.
If they didn't think it was
frankly,
important, they wouldn't do it.
The thing about the drone, issue is that it's stupid. I mean, that's like robbing a bank in broad daylight. I mean, at some point you're going to get nailed, and they did.
Yeah, but nobody gets anything when you rob banks at night. That's the whole point. Listen, we want to talk take our attention to what's happening down in the States, because it's a whole new election now. Obviously, the stakes have changed. The polling proves it. We got a real horse race in the U.S. More with Charles Adler in just a second. This conversation is happening with the support of the amazing team at California Closets, who want to make sure that if you have resolved in 2024 to get decluttered, to get organized, they are your go-to. They have a team of designers and a team of installers that are, without a doubt, the best in the business. And the coolest part about getting started with California Closets is the consultation is totally free. You've got nothing to lose. You sit down with their team, you lay out your vision. They can swing by your place and actually get a sense for the rooms you're looking to transform, the spaces you'd like to get organized, and then they can come up with a plan for you, show you some renderings. Of course, all of this is part of that free consultation, nothing to lose. And when they do get started, working with your budget, working with your timeline, you have the confidence knowing that the finished product is guaranteed for life. You can see how they've improved the homes and lives of their clients across the country by visiting them online at californiaclosets.ca. If you're looking to get your post-secondary journey started this year, but you're sensing barriers in the way, there have always been hurdles, whether it's your schedule, maybe it's where you're living, you're not anywhere close to a brick and mortar university, take 2 seconds today to learn more about the AU Advantage at Athabasca University. They've got programs and courses, world-class, accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education whenever and wherever it works for you. That's why they've got tens of thousands of satisfied alums. You can open up your own options with the online offerings at AU. Your only commute to your device. Get started today at athabascau.ca. And all this talk about communities rebuilding. I know the team at Complete Care Restoration, I was talking to a couple of them just last week. A whole bunch of them will be ready to deploy to Jasper as they've got more than 25 years of experience restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. They'll be working on demolition. They'll be working on smoke damage. They'll be helping people get those properties restored, get the peace of mind rebuilt, because that's what they do. They're ready to respond 24/7 if disaster strikes in your community. Remember the name, Complete Care Restoration. Chuck, last time you and I spoke, we referenced and we got into talk around Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance. But since we spoke, a comment of his from a few years ago has resurfaced, and people are talking a whole lot about childless cat ladies. In 2021, he alleged that childless cat ladies were running the nation and wanted everybody to be as sad as they are. He referenced Kamala Harris. He referenced Pete Buttigieg, for what it's worth, and others. People are digging to try to learn more about the guy who could be Donald Trump's vice president. What do you make of the childless cat ladies story? Is this damaging to this guy, or is this a 48-hour news cycle item?
The central reason it's damaging to these guys is because the Republicans in the States, just like the conservatives in Canada, they rely on something that's very, very important to their messaging, that they are regular people. They are regular Americans, or the conservatives in Canada, regular Canadians. And once you go from regular to weird, which is what J.D. Vance has done, all of a sudden that important narrative is destroyed. The objective in Republican circles is to always make the Democrats look like they're weird. There's nothing weirder than someone attacking people, not attacking just political leadership, but attacking all aspects of the Democratic base for, not having biological children. I mean, on the one hand, it's cruel. Obviously, it's cruel. Many people are trying to have kids and are unsuccessful, and it's the most difficult thing in a lot of people's lives. The idea of infertility is horrible. That's why the whole idea of the Republicans and their agenda, Project 2025, going up against IVF is absolutely ridiculous. Why would anyone try to deprive people who have fertility issues from having IVF treatment? But the idea, the central idea that people who do not have children being taxed higher or not having their votes counted the way people are having people who do have children. Just one line here that really stuck out to me, just to show you how weird J.D. Vance is. J.D. Vance said that the role of government is to punish people for doing bad things and to reward them for doing good things. Not having children, whatever the reason, not having children is a bad thing that needs to be punished, perhaps with higher taxes or less voting power. And having children is a good thing. I mean, I'm sorry. This is dumber than a drone.
The early indicators on the Harris campaign in her first week, unbelievable fundraising, $200 million raised in the first week of the campaign. Polling released just hours before we're talking by ABC News and Ipsos survey of about 1,200 adults in the States show that Harris's favorability rating stands at 43%, which is up a remarkable 8 points from the 35% favorability that she recorded in a previous poll before Joe Biden pulled out of this campaign. The unfavorability view of Harris has also fallen from 46 to 42%. So people that were actively feeling unfavorable about her are dropping. By comparison, Trump's favorability rating has fallen 4 points from 40 to 36. Pretty interesting. So, I mean, there's obviously going to be early bumps. There's kind of the honeymoon period here. People are excited about the new nominee. Now people are there's been really effective media campaigns. The advertising that the campaign is pushing out is being lauded by a lot of people. There's a lot more life in the campaign right now. The question is, can she maintain this, and will these trends continue to move in the direction they're moving all the way through to November 5th? If they do, this could turn around what most people were expecting to happen, but it's not a guarantee.
Look, Donald Trump wasn't elected president in the first place because he had been a successful mayor and a tremendous governor and was famous for all sorts of public service. None of those things were true. What Donald Trump was a celebrity. He was a star of Celebrity Apprentice. He became a cultural icon. When you become a cultural icon, you get all kinds of immunity on issues where you may be a little silly or a little weird or even a little wrong. Donald Trump had that status. He doesn't have that anymore. Now he's seen as a politician, not a very, very good thing in the eyes of most people. Kamala Harris, when she was seen as a politician, was seen as a mediocre politician, and her favorables weren't very good, and her unfavorables were high. But now, thanks to TikTok, thanks to Instagram, thanks to those cat ladies like Jennifer Aniston, Taylor Swift, and many others. Okay, Kamala Harris is now fast becoming a cultural icon. And that's why Donald Trump is losing it every single day. Donald Trump is not a stupid person. He's a vulgar person and sometimes a hateful person. He's not stupid. He knows good media, and he knows that media will do a lot of free media and even bend over backwards to get interviews with Kamala Harris. You're going to see her on all the late night talk shows. You're going to see a lot of positive stuff about her. New Yorker magazine right now has her as Carmelot, referencing Camelot in the JFK days. The bottom line, Kamala Harris is a much larger figure today than she ever was. Barack Obama became huge, not because he had done all sorts of public service either, but because he became a cultural icon. And once you become iconic, you develop some bulletproofing, at least for a few months. So some people say, well, we're about 100 days away from the election. 100 days seems like a lot to some people. Not if you're an icon. If you're an icon, you can carry it for years. And the last thing I'll say about it is Justin Trudeau, when he was leading the number 3 party, was not given a chance by all of the usual suspects, because after all, the Liberals were number 3. But Justin Trudeau quickly became an icon, and that defeated Stephen Harper.
People just want to be motivated. You know, people want to be inspired. People want to have that fire lit under them. People want to believe that the cynicism doesn't have to be the calling card of all politics. People want to believe that they can trust somebody to have their best interest in mind. And regardless of what party that is, the individual, especially in the American system, that can compel someone to feel that way is going to see success. Meantime, James in the live chat is just wondering, so if I get a cat, do I get to run the world? I don't know, Johnny, what did your world running improve when you guys welcomed cats to the household? I don't know. We're a dog household, so I don't know.
I just think this whole JD, I agree with Adler on that. He's just weird. Like, can you imagine, when George H.W. Bush was running, if Dan Quayle came out and said something like this? And Dan Quayle was weird. Like, this just, to me, I'm an average guy. I always say this. I'm average intelligence, average height, average weight, everything. I don't have kids, and I've got 2 cats. You immediately turned me off. If you're trying to pull me over to your side, JD Vance, you should just not say things like this because it's stupid.
But if you were a Trump voter,
I'm not definitely not. But if you're trying to sway me,
and here's my thing, and like poor Dan Quayle. Dan Quayle's been there. where everybody was. Wasn't he the guy that got caught up on how to spell potato?
Oh yeah, I couldn't do it.
But man, I was staring at it.
But think about it. Even I mentioned it, dumber than a drone. JD Vance is behaving like a smart guy. He's smart technically, but he's behaving like a guy who's dumber than rocks. Okay,
that's what I mean.
Dan Quayle seemed like he was dumber than a rock because even a potato knows how to spell potato.
Even a guy who can't spell potato wouldn't say something like this. And I just feel like I love when you say this, you're explaining you're losing. I feel like at some point he's going to come back and say, listen, I know there's Republicans out there who don't have kids or can't and have cats. And maybe I'm sorry for saying this because it's utterly, it's just very stupid.
So he did an interview with Megyn Kelly on Sirius XM just a couple of days ago. And he said, obviously it was a sarcastic comment. He says, I've got nothing against cats. I love that. Just even the subtlety there of not complimenting the people he named, like AOC and Buttigieg and the rest. He goes, I've got nothing against cats. He says, but the media focused so much on the sarcasm and not the substance of what I actually said. He said, it's not a criticism of people who don't have children. I explicitly said this is not about criticizing people who don't have kids. It's about criticizing the Democratic Party for becoming anti-family and anti-child. Noted comedian Chelsea Handler had something to say about this, and I got a real kick out of it. I thought Real Talkers might as well. So here's what she had to say about this whole thing.
Oh, hey. As you might have heard, Donald Trump's running mate and future star of his own Dateline episode, J.D. Vance, is ruffling quite a few feathers this week.
We're effectively run in this country by a bunch of childless cat ladies who look at Kamala Harris. The entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Listen up, you wingnut elegy. This country is still controlled by men in systems that were set up by men that are carefully crafted to continue to benefit men. So to put it in women-hating terms, you'll understand you're being hysterical. But let's be clear, there's no correlation between childless people and the presidency. For example, our very first United States president, Mr. George Washington, didn't have children. In fact, he had 2 stepchildren. That's right, just like someone else I know. And to your point about Kamala not being fit because she's not a mother, I'd like to remind you that no president in the history of the United States has ever been a mother. But maybe if she had 5 kids with 3 different men and a scandalous affair with a porn star and was convicted felon, that would be more palatable to Republican men. I mean, my God, are we tired? You sad, diet, Mountain Dew drinking, couch humping, dolphin porn aficionado, all of us childless cat and dog ladies are going to go from childless and crushing it to childless and crushing you in November. And before you tell me he didn't really fuck a couch, spare me. I grew up in New Jersey in the 80s where everyone had a couch in their basement, and I know a couch fucker when I see one.
Okay. So there you go. When Chelsea Handler takes it on, she can speak for millions. I thought that she kind of hit the nail on the head there. That's
what this election has become about. It's cat ladies versus couch fuckers.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. There you go. Not bad. By the way, Jillian, who joins us, we appreciate as she is able, more in the summer months than otherwise because we know she's a teacher, chimes in and says, you guys, Dan Quayle didn't just misspell potato. He corrected a kid who had
how to spell potato.
The kid spelled it right, and Dan Quayle corrected him in the wrong direction. So there you go. And James pointing out as well, back in 2012, this flared up. You remember this? Alison Redford's PCs took one on the chin when then Wild Rose Party leader Danielle Smith, who was trending toward getting elected as premier, by the way, in 2012 till the whole Lake of Fire thing happened. A staffer ultimately resigned. Her name's Amanda Wilkie, for tweeting about how Danielle Smith was childless and kind of pointed that out. Smith, in a politically pretty astute move, went on the record and said, my husband and I have been trying to have kids for a long time and it hasn't happened for us. Blew up in the face of the PCs, obviously didn't play well, and the staffer paid for it with their jobs. So there's a political reference similar to this story, a little closer to home.
There's another aspect of this childless business that appeals to some people. And those are people who feel that white people, these are white people, some of them are, I guess, could be called white nationalists or white supremacists. Some of them are upset because white people, in their opinion, aren't having enough children. And brown and black people are having more children. And therefore, black and brown people will replace the word that white supremacists like to use, will replace us, will replace the white folks. And so that's a part of all this narrative. But all of this is negative. All of this redounds to Kamala Harris. because Kamala Harris says, and these are the words that really get to people and get the crowds going and get the money going, we're not going back. In general, healthy societies don't like to go backward. They're not staring at the rear view. They want to go forward. If Kamala Harris continues to represent the future and the weird guy and his buddy Donald Trump represent the past, then I think Kamala Harris has a tremendous chance of becoming the next president.
I agree. This is just points for Harris. I mean, J.D. Vance is just giving her points. And I mean, it's just another instance in which, and I know I'm a man saying this, but like, we're just punishing women no matter what. We punish them if they have kids, saying, hey, they're too preoccupied with kids. They take too much time off work. They can't do the job because they are childbearing and they are mothers. And then if they don't have kids, we punish them the same as well. And I think as soon as I saw this clip today you were going to play, I'm like, Chelsea's just nailing it. And JD, I know there's some meeting they had after where they were like, could you just tone down on, talking about women and children in general from here moving forward?
Can I ask a question of Johnny and Ryan here?
Yeah, go.
Because Donald Trump was very famous for many things that he said on Celebrity Apprentice. But the most famous thing he said frequently was, you're fired, okay? Here's my question to Johnny and Ryan and anyone who's watching or listening right now. Do you think that in the coming days, Donald Trump will decide to say to J.D. Vance what he said to other people who were losing Celebrity Apprentice? Do you think Donald Trump will publicly say, J.D., you're fired?
No. But I do think that if there's anyone who can just switch up running mates and probably not change a thing in his numbers, it is Trump. But I don't think he will. But I can't wait to see it. We're talking about Dan Quayle. We're talking about I can't wait to see more of what JD has just fall out of his mouth. And I agree. Like, Kamala didn't even have to address it. It's just he's giving her. He's putting wind in her sails. So I thought,
Ryan, what's your response?
Well,
Donald Trump would own several news cycles, and he would change the narrative very quickly if he were to fire J.D. Vance, and he would also show some people that maybe there's a kernel of morality in the man.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't put it on morality. The only thing that I think would be a determining factor is whether or not he thinks that his election chances are harmed by having Vance on the ticket. I think that Trump is such a huge name on the ticket that I kind of sort of feel, not entirely, and I don't necessarily want this to be the one sentence of mine pulled out of this conversation, but I kind of feel like the VP pick, the running mate, is insignificant and relatively irrelevant when it comes to Trump because he's such a huge personality.
Agree.
He's such a big ticket. I think for a lot of people, they were looking at the Biden-Harris ticket and they're going, Biden's 81, and I mean, Trump's 78, but I'm just saying, like, Biden... Everybody knows this isn't, I don't know why I hesitate to say this. The facts are he was looking feeble. He was struggling, and people are going, really? Like 4 more years of this? So then people start looking at Harris like there's a very good chance, like it almost feels like an inevitability that she was going to be president at some point. So people were looking at Biden's running mate as like, this is a very significant and important detail. Not to say that something couldn't happen to Trump, heaven forbid, but I'm just saying, like, Trump is such a, it's like in the forest where you got that one big, huge tree that gets all the sunshine and gets all the rain, and then there's not a lot growing underneath the tree because the tree is so big. You know what I mean? I will say this, the mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, who for 11 days was employed by Donald Trump at the White House. You remember this. The New Republic interviewed Anthony Scaramucci, who may have, I believe, the shortest tenure employed by anybody in a high-profile position, any president of the United States in history. He did set the record for the shortest time served in the Trump administration at 11 days, has predicted on CNN just a few days ago that J.D. Vance will not last much longer on the ticket. He says that Trump made a mistake choosing Vance over Nikki Haley in particular. And he says, and he's measuring days in Scaramucci's. He says, we'll have to see. He says, I do have experience with Donald Trump. I do think he could fire him. It's just a question of how many Scaramucci's JD is going to last. That being reported by the New Republic.
Before you get off
I think Donald Trump likes looking strong, and I think that it would make him look strong to say, J.D. Vance, you're fired.
Before we get off the presidential thing, I think we should still do this clip of Harrison Barrymore.
So here, let me set this up. So this is interesting, and Chuck, I know that you saw this because you and I had briefly corresponded about this. Jason Zinoman is the comedy writer for the New York Times, and he does great work. If you subscribe to the Times like we do, you already know this, that Zinoman's writing is hilarious. And so he's taken on, in a New York Times feature, Kamala Harris's laugh. The Trump campaign has made it very clear that they see Kamala Harris's laugh as a vulnerability to exploit. But Jason Zinoman in the New York Times argues that it's one of her most effective weapons. Now, to tee this up, Chuck, before we get to you, back in April, it was the end of April 29th, so before all of this development with Biden, Kamala Harris appeared on Drew Barrymore's talk show, and she was talking about, being a woman as vice president and a lot of the pressures that come with it, the expectations, the public treatment. She talked about a ton of things, including her laugh. Kamala Harris talking to Drew Barrymore about her laugh. What do you make of this, Chuck?
Well, it's hard for me not to identify with it because I inherited my mother's great big laugh. And my mother, for years, was one of the greatest storytellers that I ever witnessed. People tell me I'm a pretty good storyteller, and I always say, well, I'll never be as good as my mom. And some people like my big belly laugh, and I say it's never going to be as good as my mom's. My mom is a warm, convivial person, and her storytelling and her laughs have been marvelous. I think those same assets help Kamala Harris. And if Donald Trump and others want to go after Kamala Harris for having a laugh, I think that too makes them look weird. By the way, you almost never see Donald Trump laughing. In real life, Ryan and Johnny, how much do you trust human beings that you know or people who want to ingratiate themselves to you? And they're people who never laugh. Do you not see that as a bit weird? I think laughing is probably the healthiest thing you could do for yourself.
That is strange.
I can't
even picture his laugh now that you mention that, Charles.
He never laughs.
I want to be clear. I'm not comparing these two people I'm about to name, but I will say this. So Trump has a very a curated public persona, right? The way that he talks, the cadence, his nicknames, kind of just his hand, the way he moves his hands and I didn't even comment on the size of his hands. I just said the way he moves his hands. I'm keeping this objective as possible. But laughing, like belly laughing, is not part of it. Donald Trump has never. You even look at he's got his look, right? He's got the navy suit, the white press shirt, and the red tie for the most part. It deviates from that a little bit, but if Donald Trump's at a UFC fight, or if Donald Trump's at WWE, or if Donald Trump's at a barbecue in Kentucky, or if he's at the White House, he's wearing the same outfit, whereas other politicians are a little bit different. They sort of appeal more to your humanity. Donald Trump's not picking up a lot of kids and babies. He's not doing posing at the petting zoo. He's not doing that kind of stuff, right? That's not his image. Whereas other politicians, that's how they roll. Now, here's the thing. Another individual, Johnny, you and I talked about this before, although I can tell by your feet you're going, where is he going with this?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
When's the last time you saw Connor McDavid laugh?
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean?
I've always referred to Connor, and I love me some Connor as kind of an AI robot.
Ever see it because he's so focused, he's so dialed in. But you talk to people that know Connor McDavid, they say that he's a real character. He's hilarious. When he has people over at his house and he's entertaining behind closed doors, apparently he's nothing but laughs. He's nothing but happiness. But he's grown up, I think. I don't know anything about Connor personally, but you've grown up since you were 7. People are there's something really special about you. Since you're 13, people are you're going to be the first overall pick in the NHL. When you're 18, they give you the key to the city. You got $100 million by the time you're 23. It's just not a normal life. You can't be out sort of out on the street laughing with your friends, being silly, being a normal 21-year-old. He's like a curated product almost. And so the laughter thing, I do agree with you. It says a lot when someone that is so in the public eye, a level of celebrity that none of us or nobody listening to this could ever wrap their mind around, when they show you that side of them, when they do belly laugh, when they cry, when they share something that makes them feel insecure, when they talk about a mistake that they made. These are the things that endear people to the public. And it's always interesting when someone chooses against that strategy.
Look, I'm pro-human, okay? So Kamala Harris is human, so I'll put my cards on the table. I favor that, okay? I favor someone who's comfortable in their own skin, comfortable with their humanity. Donald Trump, to me, he's like you mentioned WWE and UFC earlier. He's like a WWE character, Donald Trump. And he likes his character. It's worked for him for the most part, and so he stays in character. But that, to me, is not what I think of as a real human being.
Yeah, I love this from Cindy, who goes, sorry, a woman's laugh is being slammed? What the actual fuck? That from Cindy? Fair enough. I saw Jill leave a comment here that basically said, sorry, Jill, I'm paraphrasing. What does she say? She says basically like people who criticize women's laugh are people that have raised women to be invisible, which I thought was a good comment. And then other people are just showing how, if you're cracking down on someone's laugh, this just goes to show how desperate people are to discredit the candidate. It's funny. It's one of those things where you go like, is this the most important thing that we should be talking about it through this presidential race? And the answer is obviously no, but attack strategies are always fascinating to watch. People are watching how the Harris campaign is attacking Trump in its first week, and the creativity abounds. They're doing a very effective job if you look at how it's turning public opinion. And then the strategy of how the Republicans, of how the Trump campaign will evolve from honing in on Sleepy Joe. Now they got their hands full with Kamala Harris.
Well, I think Kamala Harris is turning Donald Trump into the new Joe Biden. That's a place that he never wants to be. And as far as talking about some things that may not be the most important things in the world, we're talking about the stuff the campaigns are talking about. We're talking about the stuff that the public is talking about. And that's why we call the thing real talk. It's real talk because it's real.
I'm glad you brought that up. So that was something I'm looking at now with all the headlines now. It's kind of like the script has been flipped. Now you've got the old bumbling guy, and Kamala Harris looks like the young, whip smart,
100%,
president-elect. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I said this before. Our guest on Friday before this all happened, sorry, I'm forgetting her name. Jesus.
Describe her for me.
The senator.
Paul Simons?
Paul Simons, of course. We love Paul Simons. She called this right away. She's like, yeah, everything looks one way right now, but if tomorrow J.D. Vance or Kamala Harris went up against each other, how would it be? Kamala Harris against Trump. And it has. It's the script has totally flipped because now Trump is the old guy. Trump is the guy holding the handrail going up Air Force One. Kamala Harris is out there dancing, and it's not awkward, that kind of thing, right? So
we do encourage everybody to use the handrail as you're boarding aircraft.
Yes, it is a safe way to board
regardless of age. And if you want to check out that interview with Paula Simons, I just really loved that hour and a bit with
awesome.
her. That was on the 19th of July, that episode, Paula Simons Expenses Revealed. She comes on the show and just starts revealing her own expenses. Starts talking politician salaries. It's one of my favorite conversations we've ever had with the senator out of Alberta. Make sure you check that out. Chuck, I know that you and I debriefed after that one as well. It's good to see your face, brother. Have an amazing week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Love you, Johnny. Tice Automotive, Edmonton, and I got to say that I also love Paula Simons. And Paula Simons, okay, just like Kamala Harris, is a real human being, and Paula has a great big laugh.
She sure does. You're not wrong about that. Add her to the list. And I feel like some of our most favorite guests on the show, we've never steered clear of welcoming the big belly laughs. Charles Adler, presented weekly on Real Talk by Tice Automotive Consulting. Well, every week we wrap our episode, the first episode of every week, with a reminder from our dear friends at Kuby Renewable Energy that beautiful things are all around us. This is our celebration of humanity. We call it Positive Reflections. And sometimes it's a random act of kindness. Sometimes it's a story of somebody paying it forward. But this is a Jasper Strong edition of Positive Reflections. We've heard from so many of you in emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com how the Jasper fire is resonating with you, how it's impacting your perspective. A lot of you live in Jasper. Some of you visit there on the regular. And we got this beautiful email from Coreen, who said, I know that this has been a really tough week, and we're all feeling emotions after this big Jasper fire. I wanted to share that we learned on the news that the Patricia Street Deli survived. This from Coreen, who took the time to write in, and she says, last month when we were in Jasper, we found this delightful little spot with the best sandwiches, and Johnny, it's dog friendly. She says the owner even brought out some freshly cooked chicken for our Golden, for their dog, because the owner loves dogs. and says, and I saw there was a reporter that was interviewing the owners, and they were almost positive that their business was gone as they were evacuated. But during the interview, they learned from family members that their deli was still standing, and there were tears of gratitude all around. Coreen says, while there is so much devastation, finding these good news stories always lifts the heart and gives us hope. And so we wanted to give a shout out to Coreen and to David. Both of you, we know that you are steadfast Real Talkers. We sure appreciate you sending us this positive reflection. Want to give a shout out to the team at the Patricia Street Deli in Jasper. We can't wait to get back out there, and of course everybody that's working to get that town reopened and ultimately rebuilt. You can share your positive reflection with us, something that just made your day, that filled your bucket, by sending us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. And of course, you can get a free solar quote today by checking out kubyenergy.ca. We got a lot coming up this week. We'll talk to the mayor of Jasper, Richard Ireland, coming up on Wednesday's episode. That's going to be the 31st of July. We're going to talk to Dr. Jody Carrington about grief, about mourning, about losing a big part of a town to wildfire, and how to process it mentally, emotionally, and otherwise. We want to be well as a community as we gather together here, and we can't do that without you. So we appreciate you. Thanks for telling your friends about Real Talk. Thanks for subscribing on the podcast and on YouTube. And don't forget, this is essentially last call for the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. Applications are accepted until August 1st. You can find the details on the Connect link at ryanjesperson.com. A $5,000 scholarship for a post-secondary student anywhere in Canada that's lost a parent to cancer. The deadline to apply is August 1st. Thanks for being a part of this Real Talk.
Real Talk